Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this workshop on transitioning to ArcGIS Pro. This workshop assumes that you have some experience with GIS, specifically with ArcMap, and that you may have heard about this new application, ArcGIS Pro, that kind of burst on the scene a few years ago, and that you're maybe exploring transitioning to this application. And I'm Molly Webb. I'm a GIS developer here at the University Libraries on the data services team. Okay, so in terms of actually using ArcGIS Pro, members of the WashU community can receive ArcGIS Pro licenses. And if you haven't already installed the software, you can go to our LibGuide and click on the software installation guide, which will walk you through the steps. Basically, you're going to register your information. That will provide you a link to download the installation files, which you just essentially run on your machine to install. And then you will be prompted to select your licensing option, and most of our WashU users go through the named user licensing scheme, which essentially is through your ArcGIS Online account. So if you don't have an ArcGIS Online account, the software installation guide will walk you through the steps of obtaining one of those, so then you can license your software. um, As you probably are already aware, in terms of Esri products, they are Windows only. So if you do not wish to install ArcGIS Pro on your own machine, or perhaps you're a Mac user, you can also access ArcGIS Pro as well as many other GIS applications and other analysis-related applications in the Research Studio in Olin Library. Now, of course, the Research Studio is not available to patrons right now, but we have enabled remote access to the Research Studio machines. And so we've got another research guide with, there's a link in the slides to that research guide to give you information on how you can access the Research Studio machines remotely. And just a little bit more information on some other GIS resources on campus. To get help with GIS and really anything data related, the data services team hosts open help desk hours Monday through Thursday. On Monday and Tuesday, they're in the afternoon, and on Wednesday and Thursday, they're in the morning. So you can check out our website for those hours and for the Zoom link, because of course it's all happening over Zoom right now. We also have appointment-based support, so you can email me or any one of the team members, and we can find a time that works for both of us to have a Zoom call to talk about any issues you might be having. And then also the company that develops ArcGIS Pro, Esri, they have a very robust catalog of training materials ranging from short 1-hour videos to full multi-session web courses and so on and so forth. And also instructor-led training too. There's both free and paid content, and so for much of the paid content, your ArcGIS Online account will get you access to the web-based paid content. So again, you can see the software installation guide for information on how to get your ArcGIS Online account, or you can shoot me an email too, that's fine. Let's take a look at the time frame. So you're probably, since you're taking this workshop, you're probably already aware of both ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro. Recently, Esri has made some announcements that has kind of increased the urgency a little bit of maybe getting familiar with ArcGIS Pro. So how long can you continue to use the ArcMap application? So the current version of ArcMap is 10.8.1. It was released this past summer. A few weeks ago, around mid to late October, Esri announced that they have no plans to release a version 10.9. So that pretty much means that ArcGIS 10.8.1 is going to be one of the last versions, if not the last version. They may release a minor version like a 10.8.2, but that's kind of unknown at this point. So the time frame we've got going here for ArcMap is up until 2022, they'll still be providing software updates and patches for ArcMap version 10.8.1. Extending beyond 2022, they'll still continue to offer technical support in terms of logging help desk calls with Esri and so on and so forth. And then after 2024, what's going to be available is the online support and resources, meaning that the documentation for ArcMap will still be available. And right now, their plan is to have that available until at least 2026. So they put all this stuff out there in their product lifecycle webpage, which I've provided a link to. And so if you're interested in learning more details about what this actually means, then you can check out that product lifecycle page. 2026 is kind of a long ways away. There's several years in between, but sometimes learning new software applications can take a while. Becoming comfortable with them can take a while. And so that's why here at WashU and the data services team, we're starting to ramp up our support for ArcGIS Pro so we can help all of our users transition smoothly. Okay, so for this particular workshop, what we're going to be taking a look at is the project structure of ArcGIS Pro, key terms in terms of what things might have been called in ArcMap and then what they're called now in ArcGIS Pro. We're going to take a look at the application interface, and then for our hands-on portion, we're going to be doing some attribute table manipulation. We're going to work with map layouts, both existing MXDs and creating a new map layout. We'll take a look at symbology and labeling. We'll take a look at how we run geoprocessing tools in ArcGIS Pro, and then we'll also take a look at editing. And as we go through this workshop, feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question out loud. That's fine too. This is a really casual workshop, so feel free to just reach out if you have any questions or comments. Okay, so the major difference between ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro is the project structure. Essentially, ArcGIS Pro kind of wraps everything in this project container. So in this, on this slide, we have kind of a comparison of ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro. So in ArcMap, we had our map document, which was our MXD. And then within the MXD, we would have our layouts, and we would have one or more data frames within the layout. And we could switch back and forth between data view and layout view just by kind of toggling a button back and forth. And so we could have one layout that had maybe a main content data frame, and then maybe a reference map data frame or something of that nature, but layouts could essentially have one or more data frames, and then everything was encompassed in the MXD or the map document. In ArcGIS Pro, they've greatly expanded the capabilities of the project file. So everything is encompassed in a project file. And then within the project file, you can have multiple layouts, and within your layouts, you can have multiple map frames, which are essentially containers for maps. So it's a little bit different than ArcGIS, or excuse me, than ArcMap, in the fact that we can have multiple layouts in one project, which is actually welcome news for many GIS users. The ArcGIS Pro project is more than just the project and the layout and the maps, though. I've kind of did this expanded view to show that. So going from left to right, we've got two layouts. One layout could be a letter size layout, and another layout could be an 11 by 17 layout. They could both be fed by the same map. That's definitely possible. And we can have multiple maps within a single layout. One thing that's very new to all of us in the GIS world in ArcGIS Pro is the fact that you can put both 2D and 3D data. You can store that all in the same ArcGIS Pro project. So you can have 2D maps in your layouts, and then in the middle section here, you can have 3D scenes. ArcGIS, they call their 3D kind of display a scene. And so you can have a global scene, which of course, as the name suggests, is kind of like a global scale 3D. And then you can have a local scene, which is designed for a smaller area. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that we have all of our maps and scenes and layouts stored within the project, as well as a project geodatabase and project toolbox. So if you have custom tools that you're using, you can save them in your toolbox, and then all of your data can be stored in a geodatabase if you wish. Some key terms between ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro, kind of reviewing what we discussed in the previous slides. The data view in ArcMap is now called a map view or a map in ArcGIS Pro. Layout view is just called a layout. A data frame is called a map frame now. If you are doing work with data-driven pages in ArcMap, that is now called a map series in ArcGIS Pro. A lot of the ArcMap tools that would show up as separate windows are now showing up as docked panes in ArcGIS Pro, so they'll just be kind of docked along the side. And then also when we would explore our data and use pan and zoom and identify in ArcMap as all kind of separate tools, those have now been all lumped into one tool called the Explore tool in ArcGIS Pro. And if you're interested, I've provided a link to the terminology guide, which expands a lot on all of these different terms, as well as many other differences between ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro. Okay. And so the most immediate difference that you'll see between ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro is the application interface. So here is just a screenshot of regular ArcMap, which we're probably all used to. We've got the menu items at the top. We've got our table of contents on the left side, our main map content window in the center, and then we can have either like the catalog or maybe the search bar docked as a pane on the right-hand side. Looking over at ArcGIS Pro, the interface generally is similar, but there are some major differences here. The main difference is going to be the addition of these navigation ribbons here on the top. So as we click the different menu tabs, those are going to open up different ribbons of information across the top. Then whenever you have specific things highlighted or selected, there's going to be these contextual tabs that show up. So if you are using, say, some of the more recent versions of Microsoft Office, you'll see that the interface is pretty similar in terms of the ribbon-based navigation, and then those contextual tabs. So for example, in Microsoft Office, if you have an image selected, then you'll have a picture format contextual tab that will show up that gives you options specific to that item. So it's very similar in ArcGIS Pro. If we have a specific layer highlighted, then a feature layer contextual tab is going to show up with options that are specific to that layer. And that's probably one of the more difficult things to get used to when you're transitioning between ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro. I know I've had some struggles with it, so that's why I wanted to specifically call it out in this workshop. I'm going to open up ArcGIS Pro. So when you open up ArcGIS Pro, you're going to get this start screen here. On the left is going to be a list of all of the recent projects you've been working on, if you've been working on any. In the center is where you can start a new project, either a map or a scene or a local scene. Or you can also click Start Without a Template if you don't want to create a whole project file, you just maybe want to explore some data, you can start without a template, and that will skip the step of creating a new project folder, which we'll see here in a second, the creation of the project folder. Also in the upper right-hand corner is going to be your identity. So if you are licensing ArcGIS Pro with the named user method, you're going to need to be logged into ArcGIS Online. And so typically when you start ArcGIS Pro, you'll probably be prompted to log in to ArcGIS Online, and then your identity will show up here in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. If you imagine that you're going to be using ArcGIS Pro without internet access, then I would recommend licensing it a different way. And so if that is something that's popped up into your head, please reach out to me and I can help you get kind of a single use license that you can use without being connected to the internet. But if you license with the named user method, then you'll need to have internet access to gain to start ArcGIS Pro essentially. Okay, so I'm going to start a new map, and it prompts me with this create new project screen. So I'm going to use this folder, file folder icon, and I'm going to navigate to, I just have this workshops folder that I keep all of the information for all my workshops in, and I have created this folder with today's date for the ArcGIS Pro transition workshop. So I'm going to create my project within this folder. If you need to create a folder within this new project location dialog, you can just right click and click folder, and then that'll give you an opportunity to create a new folder if you want a new folder to keep all of this material in. But for now, I'm just going to choose this ArcGIS Pro transition folder. And then the name of my project, I'm going to call this ArcGIS Pro transition. And then I will make sure that the create new folder for this project button is selected. So what this is going to do is create a new project folder within my ArcGIS Pro transition folder, and then all of the geodatabase and the toolbox and all that stuff will be saved within that subfolder. So I hit OK. It does some work, and then it will open up with a new map in my main content area. It automatically adds a base map in there for me. And then my table of contents is now the contents pane here on the left-hand side. And then if I click on view up here at the top and then click on catalog pane, then I can see the catalog pane here on the right side. If I expand folders, then I can see here's my ArcGIS Pro transition folder that was created when I started this new project. And then if I expand that, I can see I've got a geodatabase here and I've got a toolbox here. And then there's this import log folder, which is just kind of a computer folder, and it holds basically information that we don't really need to really know what's in there. It's kind of a back end kind of thing. Also in the catalog pane, if I expand maps, now I can see I've got one map here that was created automatically because I chose the map template when I started the project. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the data that we downloaded from Box. So I'm going to minimize ArcGIS Pro, minimize my Box window, and if I open up my downloads, I can see I've got this transition to ArcGIS Pro data.zip. So I'm going to copy that and navigate back to my project folder, ArcGIS Pro transition, and then I'm going to paste that, and then I am going to say extract all. And right now for my destination, this tool is going to create a new folder called ArcGIS Transition to Transition to ArcGIS Pro Data, but I actually want all this data to be saved in my main transition folder. So I'm going to get rid of that last portion of my path and extract this data only to the ArcGIS Pro Transition folder. So I'm going to click extract on that. Okay, and it looks like it created that folder anyways, which is fine. This is still going to show up in our project directory. So I've got my data here, and if I click into my data folder, I can see I've got an MXD here. This was created in ArcMap, and then I've got two shape files that are used in my MXD. So essentially what this is replicating is any content that you may have already created in ArcMap. And since you're ready to transition to ArcGIS Pro, now you need to bring this older content into the newer application. Now, the cool thing is ArcGIS Pro will just read the MXD. We don't have to do any kind of special conversion or anything for it. MXDs can be read into ArcGIS Pro. Okay, so back to my ArcGIS Pro window. I'm going to kind of resize my window a little bit so it can be shown fully on the screen. There we go. Okay, so we know that we just added a new folder to our project folder. It's not showing up yet though, so I'm going to right click on ArcGIS Pro and click on refresh, and now I've got that DS transition to ArcGIS Pro data folder showing up. So when I expand that, I can see I've got my two shape files here, and then I also have my MXD. So the goal of this workshop here in terms of what we're going to accomplish is we're going to be working with a map that shows a specific municipality in the St. Louis County area. That municipality that I chose was Kirkwood. We could obviously do this for any municipality that we want. And then specifically, I wanted to show the vacant land parcels in Kirkwood. So that's what my MXD was showing, and now I'm going to bring it into ArcGIS Pro and do some work with it in ArcGIS Pro. So the first step that we're going to do is we're going to bring in this existing MXD. To do that, I'm going to click on the Insert ribbon to activate it, and then I'm going to find this project group right here. I'm going to go up to Import Map, and then this is going to open up an import window. I'm going to make sure that I'm in my ArcGIS Pro Transition project folder. You can see I've got two here because of my preparation for this workshop, but ArcGIS Pro Transition is my project folder. Then I'm going to go to DS Transition, and then here's my MXD Kirkwood Vacant. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to click on OK. So when I import this MXD, a couple of different things happen. The first thing that happens is that I have a new map showing up in both my main content screen and then in my maps group here in the catalog pane. This map is called layers because in my ArcMap document, my data frame was called layers, which is the default name for data frames in ArcMap. So the data frame name becomes the map name in ArcGIS Pro. Another thing that happened in the catalog pane is the addition of the layouts group here. So I'm going to expand the layouts group, and I can see that I've got a layout now called Kirkwood Vacant. It has the same name as our MXD. So this is the layout aspect of our MXD. So what ArcGIS Pro did was essentially separated those two things out. It took the data view and the layout view, and it made the data view into a map and the layout view into a layout. Okay. So to make this a little bit easier to deal with, we're going to clean up our catalog pane. So our layers map is our Kirkwood vacant parcels map. So I'm going to right click on layers and go to rename, and I'm going to call this Kirkwood vacant map. Okay, and I'm going to hit enter to register that name. And so now my map that was called layers is now called Kirkwood Vacant Map. And I can see that in my main content window, this tab was also renamed Kirkwood Vacant Map. Now for my other map, just called map, this I'm actually going to close in the main content window, and I'm going to right click on map in my maps group, and I'm going to delete it because this map right now, it doesn't have anything in it. It's just kind of hanging out. It was one of the default things that was added. So just to keep my catalog pane nice and clean and to keep any confusion from happening, I just deleted it. If I need a new map later on, I can always add one later. Okay. So now I've got my renamed map and I've got my layout. Okay. So now let's take a little bit of time to explore this data and see how we can explore our data in ArcGIS Pro. Now, like I mentioned before, if you click on the Map tab, the pan and zoom options that we were used to seeing in ArcMap have now been all combined into this single Explore button here. So if you click on the map ribbon and you click on the Explore button, then that lets you pan and zoom. If you just click and drag on it, you get that pan grab symbol. If you want to identify features, you just click on them and it identifies them right away. You don't have to activate the identify tool or anything like that like you did in ArcMap. Any pop-ups or information about the features are going to show up in the side pane here, the pop-up pane on the right-hand side of your screen. So I can see I've got my Kirkwood boundary, and then for school districts, excuse my dogs, then all of the information for the land parcels show up here. Okay, so now let's take a look at zooming into a specific area. So if we recall from ArcMap, we could just click and drag a polygon to zoom to a specific area. And we can't exactly do that in ArcGIS Pro because the clicking and dragging activates the pan motion instead of the zoom to a specific area motion. So what we're going to do here is we're going to hold shift and then click and drag to a specific area. And that is how we can zoom to a specific area using a polygon. Okay, so we just looked at how we can zoom to a specific area. And then I also want to just make sure that you're aware that the fixed zoom in and out buttons are still available on the map tab. So we can click this button to zoom out in a fixed extent and zoom in at a fixed extent. And then if you're looking for the global extent or the full extent button, there's the little globe icon there too that we can click. So this is of course going to take us to the whole extent of our base map. But if we turn off our base map, then we can, or if we removed our base map like so, and then hit the global extent, then that would just take us the extent of our layers. If we wanted to add that base map back in, we've got a nice big base map button here in the layer group of the map ribbon. So maybe I'll just drop that topographic base map back in there. And then we also have the add data button, which we're also used to seeing in ArcMap. And that, of course, lets us add different data. We can also drag it in from the catalog pane if we want. So again, to get to the catalog pane, we can either click on the catalog tab down here at the bottom, or we can go to view and then catalog pane to get that back. And we could always drag shapefiles in this way too, like we could in ArcMap. So there's really no change there. And we'll be looking at that a little bit different, a little bit later on. Okay, so that was just getting to know, exploring our data a little bit. We also, of course, want to know how we can take a look at our attribute table and do the different attribute table operations that we were used to doing in ArcMap. So I'm going to right-click on my land parcels by type layer, and I'm going to go to attribute table, and that's going to open up the attribute table automatically docked in the lower center portion of my screen. And I can use these little arrows to drag it up and get some more real estate for my attribute table if I want. So the attribute table is pretty close to what we're used to seeing in ArcMap. There are a few differences here. Across the top are some quick access buttons that previously were these actions were either in the table options menu in ArcMap, or they were just little icons at the top of the attribute table. And so now those are all kind of spread out across the top, and we can see that some of them are disabled because, you know, they are feature specific and we don't have features highlighted. As soon as we select a feature, now we can see that a lot of these buttons become active. Also, we've got this kind of more table options icon at the upper right hand side that gives us a little bit more a few more actions that we can do with our table. For example, find and replace is here, export table is here, joins and relates is here in terms of just joining tables together, and so on and so forth. What I do want to point out to you here is this new view with ArcGIS Pro, and that's the fields view. So we can get to the fields view here in this contextual menu by clicking on this icon here. Or if we want to add a new field, there is an add field kind of quick access button here in the upper left-hand corner of the attribute table. And so that's what we're going to do now. We're going to just look at how adding a field is a little bit different in ArcGIS Pro than it is in ArcMap. So I'm going to click on the add button here. And this opens up the field view for our layer, land parcels by type. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to add a new field, and then I'm going to show you what field calculator is like in ArcGIS Pro. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine some other attributes in our attribute table to create a new field in our attribute table. So when the field view opens up, we've got a list of all of our fields here, and then their aliases, and then their data type, and some other information about the fields. So I'm just going to click into this new field, and I'm going to call this full address. And I'm just going to tab through these options. It's going to be a text field. Oh, and it's showing me red right here because I already have a full address field. This is something that I created earlier when I was preparing for the workshop. If you're working along with me, you will of course not have this field already. So I'm just going to call this full address 2. Okay. All right. So now that I've added my full address field and then text, I want to make sure that I'm very clear that you need to go up to the fields ribbon up here, which will be activated when we're in fields view, and click on save. That is how you save your new fields in ArcGIS Pro. And this is something that's really easy to overlook. So after you've added your new field, make sure you go up to your fields ribbon and click save. Very important. I'm going to close my fields view. And now if I scroll all the way over to the side, I've got my new full address to column here that is ready to receive some data values. Okay, and so calculating a field is very similar to how it was in ArcMap. We're still going to use field calculator, except for I think now they call it calculate field. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to activate my map ribbon here. I'm going to navigate to the selection group here in the middle, and I'm going to click clear. That's going to clear that selected feature there, so I don't end up just using field calculator on that one feature. I want to use field calculator on all my features. Okay. So in the new field, we can do field calculator in a few different ways. We can either highlight the field and then we can click this calculate button, or like we were used to in ArcMap, we can right click and go to calculate field that way too. So we're going to have this calculate field window open up, and we'll enter in these parameters. We've got our input table, land parcels by type. The field that we're going to fill in is full address to. One thing that I do want to point out is the expression type. So if you recall in ArcMap, the two expression language options that we had for field calculator were VB script, which was the default, and then we also had Python in the later versions of ArcMap. In ArcGIS Pro, they've done away with VB script, so our options are Python or Arcade, which is actually a new expression language created specifically for ArcGIS products. Arcade is pretty cool in the fact that you know, it's an easy to use expression language. You can use it in ArcGIS Pro. You can also use it in ArcGIS Online. And not only can you use it to calculate fields, but you can also use it to set up logic in your Symbology too, which is kind of a new thing in ArcGIS Pro. That's a little bit beyond the scope of this workshop, but it is a pretty cool thing. And if it's something that you'd like to explore, please reach out to me and we can look into that together. Okay, so for this full address column, what I want to do is I want to take the address that has been kind of chopped up into different attributes in my attribute table and combine them so that I have one column that is the full address of the parcel. Okay, so Python 3 is going to be my my language, and then I'm going to fill in my values in this full address expression box here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the prop add, double click on that, and then I'm going to add a space in between there. So I'm going to use plus and then put a space in quotes there. So that's going to stick a space in between. Property add or prop add is the street number and street name. And so now I want to add the municipality to that. So I'm going to scroll down and find the municipality field. It's down here somewhere. There we go, municipality. And that is where, you know, we have Kirkwood, Creve Coeur, you know, whatever municipality that is. And I'm going to add another space. And this time, instead of just a plain old space, I'm going to add a comma, a space, and then Mo, because I want this to say Kirkwood, comma, Missouri, and then next I'm going to add the zip code, which is back up here. So if you're familiar with Python at all, you'll see that this is essentially just creating a string by concatenating a few other existing strings. Here's prop zip. Okay, so we've got prop address plus the municipality plus comma mo plus the property zip. Okay, and so hopefully I entered everything correctly. I'm going to hit apply. All right, great. And okay. And now in my full address column, I can see I've got the full address for each property, and that is a combination of values from other attributes. So that's just an example of how you can do that in ArcGIS Pro. The last thing I'm going to point out about ArcGIS Pro in adding fields is that say I click calculate again. If I wanted to, I could create a new field on the fly here. So if I wanted to say, okay, create a field for me called full address 3, and then just apply, I don't know, say a dummy value here. I'll just say hello world, and then apply. It's going to create this field on the fly for me, and it's going to just apply the data type to it based on whatever values I'm inserting. So full address 3 is going to be a text field, and so I didn't even have to create that ahead of time if I didn't want to. I could just do calculate field and it would create it automatically. So it's kind of a cool thing in ArcGIS Pro, because in ArcMap, before we had to create the field first and then we had to run field calculator. So just an interesting little tidbit there. Okay. So I'm going to close my attribute table for now. And now we're going to look at map layouts using our existing map. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually make some edits to the existing layout. So say your organization, you've transitioned to ArcGIS Pro, you have a bunch of MXDs that you've brought into ArcGIS Pro, but you do need to still make changes to the layouts sometimes. In the catalog pane, I'm going to make sure that the layouts group is expanded, and I'm going to double click Kirkwood vacant. And this is going to open up the layout in the main content window. I can switch back and forth between the map and the layout fairly easily just by clicking the tabs on the top. Okay, so this layout looks very similar to any layout that you may have created in ArcGIS or in ArcMap. Okay, say we need to make some changes to this layout. Well, the cool thing about ArcGIS Pro is that in our contents pane now, since the layout is activated, all of the elements in our layout are listed here in drawing order in our contents pane. This is pretty cool because if you remember from ArcMap, if you had a bunch of different text elements and things like that in your map, you would have to click into each one and activate it or see which one was which. And if you had things that were stacked on top of each other, sometimes it was hard to select the right one, and so on and so forth. Well, having all of these elements in their drawing order here in the contents pane is really helpful. So the first thing I'm going to do is maybe just make some adjustments to the title. So if I click on these elements here in the contents pane, they also become highlighted in our map window as well. So my title is just a text block, and it's the text block called text here. And if I wanted to, I could just click into that to make it editable, and I could call this title, so I know, okay, this is the title text block. And so right now it's highlighted. There is a solid border around the element, so this means it's in movable mode. I can move it, I can adjust it around if I want. I can also go to format, and I can kind of click into the text block here to make it editable, and I can adjust the text. Say I want to make this Missouri instead of Mo. I can also adjust the font by highlighting everything that I want to change and then going to the text symbol group. Say if I wanted to make this a different font, I could do that, and so on and so forth. Then I could just click outside of the map to, or excuse me, of the text element to then retain those changes. You can see that there's also this format text pane here, which essentially gives you many of the same options that you have in the quick access ribbons too. So a couple of different ways to get to your items. Say I wanted to make some adjustments to my legend. All right, if I highlight the legend item in my table of contents, then my format legend pane shows up here on the right, as well as a legend contextual tab right here. And so again, I can make different changes to my legend. So say I want to add just maybe a border to my legend box. Under the format legend pane, I'm going to click on this display icon here, which looks like a little box with a paintbrush in it. And then this will let me access the display options of my legend. So say I'm going to give it a nice, I don't know, dark gray border, make it 2 points, and maybe bump up the gap in between there a little bit. And so you can see that as I'm making these changes, they're happening automatically here in my map display. So I can click out of that, and now I've got this nice little border on my legend. So if you have an existing map layout that came in from ArcGIS or ArcMap, this is how you're going to make adjustments to that layout. Now, another thing that's really kind of hard to wrap your mind around, or at least it was for me in working with existing MXDs, is the fact that if you want to make any adjustments to the actual map itself, you actually have to activate that map to be able to change it. Now, we're used to, in ArcMap, maybe activating a data frame to make changes to it. So it's kind of similar to that process, but let me show you what that looks like. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on my layers map frame, and in my layout tab here now, I'm going to click activate. And what that does is that makes my map active now. So I can see back in my table of contents, or in my contents pane, now this is the contents for my actual map. So what I'm going to do here is, say I want to just adjust the zoom level a little bit. Say I'm going to just zoom out one fixed extent. If I want to do that, I have to activate the map first and then make my adjustment, and then go back to layout and close activation. So that is that applies to maybe panning and zooming, or any changes that you might want to make in the actual map frame. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, because that was something that was really tricky for me when I was kind of transitioning some of my old projects to the new ArcGIS Pro application. Next thing that I'm going to show you is how you can actually create a second layout, a new layout, and use one of the existing maps that you have. So say we're doing this work for a nonprofit organization in Kirkwood, Missouri, and they have asked us to not only create a letter size handout like this, but they also want to have an image of this map that they can put in a PowerPoint slide. All right, so we don't have a layout for this yet, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. So back to my catalog pane. I can either go to my catalog pane and I can right click and say new layout, or I can go up to my insert menu here and I can click the new layout button. Now this is kind of cool, because if I click on insert new layout, all of the kind of generally used page sizes are automatically loaded here. So if I wanted to make a new letter or legal or tabloid size, I would just pick that and it would automatically set up the page in that way. For my PowerPoint slide, I want to make sure that my image is optimized for my PowerPoint, and so I'm going to go down to custom page size. So this lets me set whatever size I want. So in the Layout Properties window in my Page Setup tab, I'm going to click on my page size dropdown and scroll all the way down to use a custom size. Okay, I'm going to set this to landscape because I'm just assuming I'm going to be using the same PowerPoint presentation as I did for this workshop today. And so I know that that's going to be landscape orientation. My width is going to be 10 inches and my height is going to be 5.7 inches. It's kind of like a squat stretched out PowerPoint slide. Okay, so I set that up in my page setup box and then hit OK. So now I've got a layout that reflects those dimensions. There's nothing in there yet, but I do have a new layout in my layouts group in the catalog pane. So to keep my data organized, I'm going to right click and go to rename, and I'm going to rename this Kirkwood Vacant PowerPoint. Okay, so I know that this layout is specifically designed for my PowerPoint slide. Okay, now I'm going to add my new map and any other map elements that I want to include. Okay, so with my layout in my main content window, I'm going to go to the insert ribbon and the map frames group, and I'm going to click on map frame. And so this would list any maps that were in my project. And so for my Kirkwood vacant map, the last extent that I was at was this, 37,500 zoom levels. So I'm going to just click on that. Okay. And so when I do that, now my cursor has become this little plus sign. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag and draw a rectangle with where my map frame is going to show up. So after I make that rectangle, now in my PowerPoint layout in the contents pane, now I've got this map frame that has the Kirkwood vacant map in it and all of the layers associated with that map. Okay, now since my page setup isn't exactly conducive to the zoom level that that map was at, I need to go ahead and I need to activate my map frame. And then I'm going to hit zoom out a little bit so I can make sure that my whole Kirkwood boundary is in there. And then I'm going to go back to layout and close activation. So that map looks okay for my PowerPoint slide. I think they're going to like it. And so next, of course, I need to add my map elements. So again, I'm going to go to the insert and then, excuse me. I'm going to start with inserting my legend. So in the insert ribbon, I've got my map surrounds group here, and I'm going to click on legend. That's going to give me that plus sign cursor, and then I'll just draw a box with where I want my legend to be. If I want to adjust some of the properties of my legend, I can make sure that my legend is highlighted here. And similar to how we worked in ArcMap, we can also right-click on our legend and go to Properties to get our Format Legend box to come back up. So there's a few different ways to get at that, those options. I'm going to go ahead and give my legend a little border, and I'll give it a white background so it shows up against the base map there. Okay. The other thing that I want to do is I want to clean this up a little bit. I've got my Lu code attribute right now, which is kind of feeding the different parcels that are being generated. And so I'm going to expand my legend. I can see I've got my two different layers in here. I can also right click and go to the properties of this particular item in my legend. So this brings up the Format Legend Item pane. And here I can uncheck headings And that's going to have that Lu code heading removed from my legend. Then I can click outside and move that around wherever I want that to go. Okay, so my legend looks satisfactory to me. I do need to go ahead and add my scale bar and my north arrow. So making sure that I'm back on the insert ribbon, I'm going to click on scale bar. All of the kind of default options for scale bar will show up. I'm going to do just the simple one and click and drag. And that's going to give me my scale bar. And then I'll do the same thing for the north arrow. Click on that and drag that, put that up in the corner, maybe make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so for the title of my map, I'm going to assume that the title of this image is going to be presented in the PowerPoint slides. So I'm not going to specifically put a title on this map. I am going to want to add some map credits though. So I'll do that just by adding a simple text box. Back to my insert ribbon, I'm going to go to my graphics and text group up here and click on the rectangle text icon. Then I'll just click and drag a box where I want my text to show. And I've got my format text window that pops up here. And so I can just say map created by Molly Webb. Then data from St. Louis County, and click out of that. And now I've got my little map credits box here. Again, if I wanted to put a border on this, I could just click on the display icon and stick a little background on that if I wanted that to show up a little bit stronger on my map display. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so far we've done kind of a lot of work already on this layout. I want to make sure that I don't lose any of that. We know how ArcMap likes to freeze and close automatically sometimes. I am sorry to say that ArcGIS Pro is similar in that regard. So I want to make sure I save so all of my hard work can be saved. We're going to move on to the next section, which is symbology and labeling. So both of these processes are also fairly similar to how they were in ArcMap, but there are little differences. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new map, and it's going to use this same data, but we're going to, instead of symbolizing the vacant parcels, we're going to symbolize all of the commercial parcels in Kirkwood. All right, so I'm done with my PowerPoint layout. I'm done with my vacant layout, and I'm done with my vacant map. So I'm just going to close all of those in the content area for now. I'm going to open up my catalog pane again so I can have all of that handy. And then I'm going to go to my insert ribbon, and this time I'm going to choose new map. So new map, and then insert a new map. So now I've got a new map called map appearing in my maps group in the catalog pane. I'm going to right click on that map and give it a meaningful name so I can keep track of what all of my maps are. So for this one, I'm going to call this Kirkwood Commercial Map. Okay. All right, so I've got my map. Now I'm going to bring in my data layers. So back to my folders group in the catalog pane, I'm going to make sure that I find my data folder that I brought in. And I'm going to click and drag my Kirkwood.shape in, so that's the boundary of Kirkwood. And then for my parcels layer, I could click and drag it, but just to show you what this is like, if I go back to my map ribbon, I can also click on the Add Data button, navigate to my project folder, and then add my parcels Kirkwood layer in like that. Okay, so now I've got my parcels and my Kirkwood boundary. So in ArcGIS Pro, it offers all of the same kinds of labeling schemes, or excuse me, symbology schemes that ArcMap offered: single symbol, graduated colors or graduated symbols, symbolized by category or by unique values. And so the two that we're going to look at today in this workshop are the single symbol and the unique values. So the first thing I'm going to do is my single symbol. I'm going to do that with the Kirkwood layer. So for my Kirkwood layer, I'm just going to give it a hollow fill with kind of a black outline to show the boundaries of the Kirkwood municipality. Okay, so doing this is pretty simple. You can just double click on the patch in the contents pane. And this brings up this Symbology pane, format polygon symbol here on the right-hand side. Similar to ArcMap, there's a gallery of already created symbol types if you want to do that. I could choose a black outline here, or I could click on Properties, and I could tweak the symbols even more. So for color, I'm going to click my palette and click no color. And then for outline color, I'll just leave it black and give it a 2-point boundary. And so down here, a preview of what my symbol is going to look like shows up in this little window, and I can click apply to actually apply it to the layer in my map. I'm going to click and drag Kirkwood above the parcels, so now my boundary shows up on top of my parcel layer. So that's single symbol. It's pretty straightforward. And so next we're going to do the unique values symbology scheme. I'm going to double check my attribute table and make sure that I'm clear on what values I want to isolate. So I'm going to right click on my parcels and open the attribute table. And if I scroll over here, I've got this LU code attribute that has all of the different types of parcels that we can have in this particular area: commercial, single family, industrial, so on and so forth. In our previous maps, we were using the vacant and agriculture designation. So we're just going to use this commercial land use code for our symbology. So I'm going to close the attribute table here. Okay. I'm going to make sure that my layer is highlighted in the contents pane. And since my layer is highlighted, now I've got this feature layer contextual tab up here at the top. In the feature layer contextual tab, I'm going to click on Appearance. And then I'm going to find this drawing group here in the contextual tab. So I'm going to click on Symbology, and then in this drop-down menu, I'm going to choose Unique Values. Okay, so everything's coming in gray right now because we have not identified the attribute that we want to use. And so I'm going to click the drop-down next to Field 1 and choose our LU code or our land use code attribute. Okay, so it's going to go through and it's going to find all of the unique values for land use code, and it's going to give them kind of a default symbology here. All right, I don't need to symbolize all of these different types of parcels. I only want to symbolize commercial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this X next to Remove Group. And then I'm going to go up to the top of the Classes tab here and click on Add Unlisted Values. And so this gives me, again, all of the unique values in my LU code attribute. I'm going to click on Commercial to highlight it, and then I'm going to click OK. So now in my Classes box, I've got commercial, and then I have everything else. To adjust the way that these symbols look, I'm going to click on the patch to activate the Format Polygon symbol pane. And I'm just going to make these kind of like a dark green. I'll leave the outline color the same. So I'll go ahead and hit apply on that. And then I'll hit the back button and I'll click on the All Other Values tab, and I'll make these a little bit of a lighter gray and then hit apply. Okay, so now I've got all my parcels that are commercial in green, and then all of my parcels that are anything else in gray. Okay. So now that I have these symbolized, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in on a particular area, and I'll show you how we can do some labeling in our map. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to create a new map for this. So I'm going to go to the catalog pane. I've got my Kirkwood commercial map here. I'm going to right click and go to copy, and then I'm going to right click on my maps group and go to paste. And now I've got 2 copies of my commercial map here. I'm going to take my new version of this. I'm going to right click and go to rename. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this Kirkwood Commercial, and then I will call this Manchester map, because I'm going to zoom in to the Manchester business corridor in Kirkwood. So first I want to close my Kirkwood commercial map, and then I'm going to double click on my new Kirkwood commercial Manchester map, so I can keep my commercial map as it is. Okay, so using my Explorer tool now, I'm going to activate that in the map ribbon. I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to zoom in to the northern part of my Kirkwood municipality, which is where Manchester Road has this kind of business corridor along it in Kirkwood. Okay, so what my task is here is I want to label with their address all of the commercial parcels, but all of the other parcels I do not want to be labeled. All right, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a label class, and this is something that is possible in ArcMap, where you can say, okay, label these certain features this way and other features another way. We did that by creating label classes. So we can do that in ArcMap as well. It just looks a little bit different. So I'm going to go to my contents pane, and I'm going to click on my parcels Kirkwood layer to activate that. Up in my contextual menu, now I'm going to go to the labeling ribbon. Okay, so right now I've got this, excuse, my mouse is a little sensitive. I've got this class 1, which is kind of the default class of labels. It applies to all the different features. What I want to do is I want to create a new class. So I'm going to click the drop down next to class, and I'm going to say create label class. And for this new label class, I'm going to call this commercial. Okay, so I've got a new class called commercial. Next, I want to tell ArcGIS Pro how it can isolate the features for this particular label class. So I'm going to click on the tiny little SQL query button next to the class dropdown. And here I'm going to create an expression that's going to isolate all the commercial parcels. So I'm going to click new expression. And then in this expression builder here, I'm going to say only the parcels where LU code is equal to commercial. So my expression is created here, and I'm going to click apply. Still nothing happening here because I haven't yet clicked the label button to activate these labels. I'm going to go back to my labeling tab. And so commercial is good to go. I want to label features in this class with the property address. That's what I want my features to be labeled with here. Next, I need to tell ArcGIS Pro that I do not want you to label any other features. So I'm going to go back to my class 1 class, which encompasses all of the features in this layer, and I'm going to uncheck the box next to label features in this class. So now when I click this label button, and this is how you activate the labeling, you click this label button here on the left-hand side. Now we'll see that all of the commercial properties are going to be labeled with their address, and then none of the other properties have been labeled. So this is how you can set up labeling for either a portion of your features or all of your features if you want. And then after you've done created your labeling classes, you can adjust the color and the font of your labels if you want. Say I want them to be Times New Roman. You know, you can just adjust that here in the text symbol. And then, oops, sorry. The reason why that I didn't see any changes here was because my class 1 was activated. If I want to change anything with my commercial labels, then I need to make sure that that's activated, and then I can make those changes. So my little icon here is telling me it's drawing, and now I can see that all of the text in my labels has been changed to the Times New Roman. And there's a bunch of different other properties that you can adjust in your labels as well. And that's how you do it up here in the labeling ribbon. On to the next section, and that is Geoprocessing Tools. Okay, so geoprocessing tools and using them in ArcGIS Pro is very similar to using them in ArcMap. As of now, almost all of the geoprocessing tools that were available in ArcMap are now available in ArcGIS Pro. They're almost 100% copied over. There are some exceptions when you get to some of the very specialized tools in like say network analyst and aviation analyst and some of the very specialized extensions. Some of those haven't been quite ported over, but all of the usual tools that we would use throughout the course of a standard GIS analysis have been ported over and are available. While we're on the subject of things being available in ArcGIS Pro or versus ArcMap, I do want to just mention that the data type of a coverage, which is kind of an older data type from the early days of GIS, that particular data type was supported in ArcMap, but it is no longer supported in ArcGIS Pro. So there was a whole toolbox for working with coverages in ArcMap that doesn't exist in ArcGIS Pro because ArcGIS Pro does not support the coverage data type. If you're not sure what the coverage data type is, don't worry. Chances are you may never come across it, but if you are working with some legacy GIS data, you may see the coverage data type somewhere. And just know that if you're going to be doing any manipulation to coverage, that needs to happen in ArcMap and not ArcGIS Pro. What you can do usually is just convert a coverage to a regular polygon and then work with it as a shapefile. That's typically the process there. Okay, so with geoprocessing, it's pretty easy here. All you have to do is find the Analysis tab, and then on the Analysis tab, we have a bunch of kind of quick access buttons here. There's some tools in this quick access menu, some of the heavily used tools here. And then we also have, let me close that, some quick access for like raster analysis and raster functions. And if you're using network analysis or business analyst, there's some quick buttons here. But if you want to just have access to all of the geoprocessing tools, you're going to find the geoprocessing group here and click on Tools. This is going to open up the geoprocessing pane on the right-hand side of your screen. And then from here, the action is very similar to the search bar in ArcMap. You're just going to type in whatever tool it is that you're looking for, and then all of the different options are going to show up here. If you are more comfortable with just digging through each toolbox, you can get to all the toolboxes here by clicking on the toolbox icon. And then you can expand, if you know which toolbox your tool is in, then you can expand that and see, like say for geocoding, here's all the different geocoding tools available. Now, besides porting over all of the existing tools in ArcMap, there are some new tools that they added. So for example, this Summarize Within tool is new. And before, we used to have to take a couple of steps to get the Summarize Within, maybe do a spatial join, and then do some summary statistics on the results. But Summarize Within essentially will make summaries of all the points or lines or polygons within a certain feature and calculate certain statistics on it. So it kind of saves us a couple of steps there. Now, since running geoprocessing tools is fairly straightforward, I'm just going to show you a standard geoprocessing tool window, but we're not actually going to run any geoprocessing tools in this workshop here. When you do go into a geoprocessing tool window, it's going to show up as a new pane on the side of the right side of your screen. And this is pretty standard. Most of the inputs and output fields are the same as they were in ArcMap. So you're going to input the parcels that you want. Your output feature class is going to automatically default to being saved to your geodatabase, the project geodatabase. If you'd rather it not go to your project geodatabase, then you can just make sure that it gets saved in, let's just call this Kirkwood buffer. Maybe I will run this tool, 1 mile. So that's going to be saved to the project folder. And you can set your units to 1 mile. And then here's all the same parameters that we're used to setting in ArcMap. If I just click run, everything's just going to run right down here. You can still work with your map while your tool is running, and then you can see the details in terms of what your parameters were and everything in this little window here. And so on and so forth. Now, since we've already run this tool, it's going to give us a little message here saying that this feature class or this shapefile already exists. And so that is just a way to kind of make sure that you rename your data if you're doing several runs of the same tool. I can right click on my layer over here in the contents pane. This is the output of my buffer operation, and I can go to zoom to new layer. And so now I can see my 1 mile buffer around the Kirkwood area. Okay, so geoprocessing tools, very similar to ArcMap. The only difference is that when you do run them, the process of running them just looks slightly different in the fact that instead of having a window pop up in the middle of your screen, it kind of is all contained in the right side pane on the right side of your application window. Any section of the content that I wanted to cover in this workshop, and that is editing. I specifically wanted to cover editing in this workshop because the process of editing can be a little confusing in ArcGIS Pro. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my Kirkwood buffer here, and I'm going to go back to my Explorer tool, and I'm going to zoom back into my my Manchester Road area that we were looking at before. Now, if I wanted to make sure that I could always get back to this particular area, I can always add a bookmark. So in our map ribbon, in the navigate group, we've got our bookmark tool, which is very similar to the bookmark tool in ArcMap. I'm just going to create a bookmark called Manchester. And then if I somehow get off course here and lose my lose my study area, I can always click on bookmark and say, click on Manchester, and this is going to take me right back to my Manchester area. But say I also want to create a new polygon that represents the study area here for my Manchester Road analysis. So I'm going to hit the back button. I can see that in the course of the workshop, I have a bunch of tabs open here. So I'm going to just kind of clean this up, maybe close some of these tabs so I can see the tabs here. And so just by way of reminder, you can get to the catalog pane by finding the tab down here if you've opened it already, or you can go to view catalog pane, and that's going to open up the catalog pane for you again. Okay, so I'm going to create a new shapefile. So I'm going to right click, go to my catalog pane, expand my project folder, and I'm going to go to new and then shapefile. So this is going to open up the Create Feature Class Geoprocessing tool. So you can see here again, the geoprocessing tools all happen within this right side pane here. I'm going to set the location. So the location is already set to my project folder. That's great. Feature class name, I'm going to call this area of interest. It's going to be a polygon. And then I want to make sure that this feature class has the same coordinate system as my existing layers. So for my coordinate system box down here, I'm going to click on the little globe select coordinate system icon. And this lets me expand the layers group here and set my coordinate system to some of the layers that are already in my map. So my parcels Kirkwood layer is using the State Plane Missouri East coordinate system. So I'm going to click on that and have that be the coordinate system of my new shapefile. So I'm going to hit OK on that. And now I'm going to click Run. Okay, so that happened pretty quickly. It says that it has completed, and I also can see this area of interest feature class, or excuse me, layer in my contents pane. Now, when I set out to edit this, one of the, I don't know, you could call this cool or maybe not cool, I'm not sure, but when we were doing editing an ArcMap, we had to specifically activate an editing session and then do our edits and then save our edits and close our session, and then we were done editing. And that was the same whether we were editing the shapes or the geometries of our feature or the attributes in our attribute table. In ArcGIS Pro, you are essentially always in edit mode. You don't have to specifically start an edit session to do edits on your features. There is this edit ribbon up here that is kind of always active and waiting for you to do edits if you want. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click Create, and I'm going to make sure that my area of interest layer is active here in my Create Features pane. And I'm going to create a polygon here. So I'm going to just click on the little polygon icon. I can see now that I have a little editing tray that has appeared in the bottom of my map content window with some quick access buttons on how to create features or different feature manipulations. I'm going to just draw a quick polygon here. So I'm going to just click and click a few vertices to create an area of interest polygon. And then when I'm done creating my polygon, I'm going to go down to my editing tray and I'm going to click the Finish button. So now I've got this area of interest feature. Since I'm done creating that feature, I want to make sure that I go back up to my editing ribbon and then click Save. That's how you save your edits in ArcGIS Pro. So even though we don't have specific edit sessions, we do still have to save our edits. So I'm going to click yes on that. And now my edits are saved. If I have an existing feature and I want to change the geometry of that, so the first thing we need to do is select the feature. So I'm going to go in my edit ribbon. I'm going to just clear that as the selected feature for now. And then to reselect that feature, I just click on select, and I can see here I can select by rectangle, polygon, lasso, circle, so on and so forth. And I should add, I didn't specifically address this in this workshop because it's kind of, this is one of the more easier things to do. But if we want to do selections in your data, in the map ribbon, there is the selection group that has the select by attribute, and select by location buttons that we're used to seeing in ArcGIS or ArcMap. Okay, back to the edit ribbon though, because we're in edit mode and we specifically want to do some selections here for editing. So I have this one feature selected, and what I want to do is I want to modify it. So I could click modify here, or since I just want to move some vertices around, I'm going to click on this edit vertices button in the tools menu. Hopefully that'll kick in. There we go. It's drawing. Let me zoom. Oh, it looks like my application might be freezing a little bit. Let's try to give it some time. There we go, zoom to layer. Okay, so I activated my edit vertices tool, and so I can see all my vertices now are ready to be edited. And I can just click and kind of drag this around. Say I want to make this, more aligned to the boundary of Kirkwood, kind of move this around a little bit, kind of a weird looking polygon, but that's okay. And then again, when I'm done editing, I can click this finish button here, and then that will take me out of the edit vertices tool. Okay, there we go. And now, of course, I have to remember to click save. And yes. All right, so I accidentally clicked my other my boundaries, so you can see all the vertices for my Kirkwood boundary are showing up here. So I'm just going to click this, whatever that button is. It's to close your edit session there. Okay, and so I hit save already, and so all my changes have been saved now. And then finally, the other thing that we might want to edit is the actual attribute data. So I'm going to right click on my area of interest and open up the attribute table. And I can see that since I just created this feature, there isn't a whole lot going on in the attribute table. One thing, so I'm going to add a field, but one thing that I do want to note is that if we did have unsaved edits in our polygon, so for example, if I clear this and then I select this and say I want to edit some vertices, and I just make a little move here, okay, and then click finish, but I haven't yet hit save. See how my add field button is disabled? That's because I currently have unsaved edits. And if I'm not sure what's going on there, ArcGIS Pro even tells me, it says this command is currently unavailable. The project has unsaved edits, or the table or its schema is read only. So I haven't saved my edits that I just made, so it's not letting me add a field just yet. If I click save in the edit ribbon and save my edits, then my add field button becomes enabled, and now I can add a field. So we already know how to add a field. We did that a little bit ago. So I'm going to just click on add field. It's going to open up my fields pane. It just opened it up right over my map for some reason, but I'm just going to call this name, and we'll make it a text. Okay, and then I'm going to hit save on that. So now I have a new field. I'm going to close my fields. And so again, I don't have to specifically go into an edit session here. Let's see, I'm trying to get this to finish up. There we go. I'm going to clear that selected feature. And so all I have to do is just double click into that particular field, and I can just call this study area number 1. Click outside of that. All right, and then click save to save my edits there. Okay, and you can see since I clicked below my my existing feature, it by default kind of added a new feature there, which I don't want. So I can always highlight that and click on delete, and then that deletes that particular feature. And then as soon as my application catches up again, it should let me save. Let's try and do that again. Delete that. Delete. Well, eventually, there we go. I could use delete right here too if I wanted. It just is not responding to me very well. But that's essentially how we can make our edits in the attribute table. So editing both the feature geometries and the attribute table. Thank you very much for joining us this morning for this transitioning to ArcGIS Pro workshop. I appreciate your time, and as always, feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions. Thank you so much.